Greetings, ladies and melogents, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called We Don't Negotiate, written by kiwispacemarine. Colony World Gliese 1060D, 2235 AD. The UD-77 Albatross dropship hurtled down through the atmosphere. The dropship was an old mixture of bulky and streamlined, aerodynamic enough to slip through the atmosphere into space, but hefty enough to transport UNSF personnel and equipment into battle. The aircraft was powered by 2 aerospiked engines for space travel and 2 Sabre Mk-45 engines for atmospheric travel. Inside the troop bay, 20 Special Forces soldiers were listening to a civilian radio broadcast. It has been nearly 5 hours since the Hotspur terrorists seized control of Tarmac Embassy, taking all personnel there as hostages, the newscaster was saying. The terrorists have yet to make any demands, but negotiations are on standby, ready to respond when needed. It is believed that the terrorists are led by the extremist Vostok, who is known to both the Office of Outer Space Affairs and the Tarmac government. Colony officials are warning. Lieutenant Boyd switched off the radio.
One is enough, he declared. We know what's going on, what's at stake, why we're here.
He looked around at the soldiers in the bay.
Can anyone tell me why we're here?
He asked them. There was no response.
No one? Okay, fine, he continued. We are here to show these Hotspur thugs that resorting to terrorist tactics ain't gonna win a war for them. This campaign of terror they're trying to wage, it ain't gonna work, 'cause we're gonna stop it right here, right now. We're going to crush these terrorist scum like bugs, just like how we're crushing them on the front. Is that clear?
He demanded from the soldiers. Sir, yes, sir, the troops shouted in response.
Good,
the lieutenant said, pleased. There was a crackle of static as the pilot's voice came through on the radio. Sir, we are approaching the LZ, said the pilot. Warrant Officer John Stevens.
Roger,
replied Boyd.
Stand by to dust off as soon as you put us down. We don't want to give them any hints that we're coming.
It is hard to hide an orbital dropship, sir, Stevens pointed out, but yes, sir, standing by to dust off. The UD-77 swooped in low over the tall buildings of the colony's capital city, selecting a landing zone near a police roadblock, 2 miles away from the Tarmac Embassy. The pilot brought the aircraft into land. Panels on the dropship's large delta wings slid back to reveal powerful landing jets, which activated with a whine. The undercarriage deployed and the Stevens' expert guidance, the aircraft gently touched down on the asphalt. The rear troop bay door opened, and the soldiers stormed out, made up of Special Force members from around the world. The UNSF Special Task Force was designed to combat terrorism and undergo other special operations on human colonies, like what they were doing now. Lieutenant Boyd consulted a small tablet device for directions. Looking up at the map, he pointed down the street.
There's our entry point,
he said, waving the men forward.
Let's go.
As the Albatross took off again, with a scream of the jet engines, the soldiers ran down the street. While they were running, Private Harris, the unit's radio man, suddenly called out to Boyle. Sir, he called, the terrorists are broadcasting their demands.
Put it on speaker,
ordered the lieutenant. Harris did so, turning the knob on the radio. The men stopped running to listen to the broadcast.
Attention, human filth,
spoke a guttural, raspy voice.
We are the Hotspur. We have captured your embassy in protest against your involvement in our war with the Tarmac. Unless you withdraw support from the Tarmac and their alliance, we will execute a hostage every hour on the hour until you comply.
They couldn't have picked a worse target, could they, sir? Said Sergeant Edwards, Boyd's second in command. If they wanted us to withdraw support, they should have hit Mars or Alpha Centauri, not this dump, he noted sardonically. It's not like the Tarmac would crumble without us either, sir, noted Private Harris. After all, they've managed to stave off these guys for what, 30 years or so, before they found us?
Still, Boyd talked over them both. The UNUSA won't allow themselves to be dictated to by a gang of thugs, no matter what their demands. Let's just get this over with, and we can debate the merits of terrorism later.
Yes, sir, replied the 2 men.
Right. Our entry point should be just a few meters away.
He led the unit down the street until they reached a manhole cover. The plan was, of course, to use the city's sewer system maintenance walkways to enter the embassy grounds, then infiltrate the building from there. Pulling the heavy metal hatchway off the hull, Boyd turned to his men.
Harris, Jenkins,
He pointed down the manhole. Take point. The soldiers nodded, looking less than thrilled at the prospect of going spelunking down a sewer. Dropping down onto the metallic grating that comprised the walkway, they raised their rifles and looked for hostiles. Switching on the helmet's night vision, Harris began sweeping the narrow tunnel. Not seeing anything, he called up to Boyd. "Nothing here, sir," he shouted up the shaft.
all clear here, sir,
confirmed Jenkins. The other special forces dropped into the shaft, taking point. Boyd led them along the tunnel, following the directions given to him by the tablet. He led the troops through a maze of corridors. It was very monotonous and very boring. It didn't help matters that there was a sense of urgency to reach the embassy and storm the building before any hostages could be executed. After several minutes of leading them through identical white tunnels that had been stained by the never-ending flow of human excrement, Boyd held up his hand. The soldiers quietly halted.
"We've got contacts,"
he whispered into the radio.
2 tangles in patrol.
"What are their weapons like, sir?"
asked Sergeant Edwards.
"Looks like they're wearing light body armor and they've got laser repeaters,"
observed the lieutenant.
"We'll have to take them out the same time, and quietly. I need 2 men up here."
Edwards waved Harris and Jenkins forward. Peeking around the corner, the 2 soldiers aimed their rifles.
"Fire!"
Boyd ordered through clenched teeth. The 2 soldiers did so, dropping the 2 guards. Just when it looked like the team would be in the clear, there came a cry of alarm from another intersection about 50 meters ahead. Another pair of terrorists had evidently been patrolling the sewers and had arrived just in time to watch their comrades be killed. Before any of the soldiers could react, a pair of laser blasts came ringing down the tunnel. One of them hit Jenkins square in the face, melting his helmet's visor. Before Harris could drag him to cover, another blast rang out, hitting the weakened armor. The pulse of the amplified light bored through the poor soldier's head, digging its way out the other side of the helmet and burying itself in the wall. The body of Private Jenkins stiffened and fell face first into the filthy water.
"There goes our surprise attack,"
muttered Boyd as Harris returned fire.
"Covering fire!"
he yelled into the radio, leaning out from cover and shooting at the aliens. The other soldiers moved up, firing their M16 S40 caseless assault rifles at the patrol. They quickly dispatched them, but not before 2 more soldiers were killed by the Hawkspur lasers.
"We've got to keep moving,"
urged Boyd as they continued up the tunnel.
"They're almost certainly nowhere here now."
After another 5 minutes of splashing through tunnels, they reached the exit point, a manhole which, according to Boyd's tablet, would place them inside the embassy grounds.
"They'll probably have the shaft guarded at the top, sir," pointed out Edwards. "I see a grating a few meters that way."
He inclined his head in the direction of the grate, marked by the thin slivers of light that shone down into the otherwise dark tunnel.
"Check it out,"
the lieutenant curtly ordered.
"Yes, sir,"
replied Edwards. Taking another soldier with him, he walked along the tunnel until he reached the grate. Unzipping a pocket on his belt, he pulled out a small periscope-like camera. Extending it, he thrust it through the grate. He activated a small view screen, no bigger than a USB stick, and examined the video feed from the camera. Rotating the stick in all directions, he looked for any signs of hostiles. According to the camera, there were no hostiles surrounding the manhole. The picture just showed an empty lawn. Some terrorists were standing at the gate behind some ad hoc cover, but the area seemed clear. Turning the stick around, he saw that there was a small outbuilding connected to the main embassy building that lay in the same direction as the sewer tunnel.
"There are a few hostiles at the gate, sir,"
Edwards reported, folding the device back up.
"But there seems to be an outbuilding that links up to the main building that we can access through the tunnel."
"How far away is it?"
asked Boyd.
"About 10 meters, sir."
"Good,"
the lieutenant replied, pleased.
"Okay, men, you know what to do. Breach and clear."
The soldiers swiftly moved along the passage until they were approximately underneath the embassy outbuilding. Boyd signaled to the unit's explosive expert, Private Cooper, who produced a breaching charge. Placing it on the roof of the tunnel, he and the other soldiers stacked up against the tunnel wall. Boyd gave him a nod when they were all ready. Pressing the detonator, Cooper watched as the carefully placed bomb blew a hole in the tunnel roof. Sergeant Edwards produced a grappling hook and fired into the ceiling of the room above them. Swarming up the rope, the special forces entered the building.
"All clear, sir,"
said Harris.
"Copy,"
replied Boyd.
"You two,"
he pointed to a pair of soldiers.
"Scout out that corridor."
He pointed to the doorway. The door was slightly ajar, revealing a passageway that led further into the embassy.
"How much time have we got until they execute a hostage?"
Boyd asked Harris, who looked at the radio records.
15 minutes, sir,
he replied after a few moments. The lieutenant swore. So much for stealth, he complained. We'll have to go in guns blazing again. Tarmac Embassy meeting room. The Dan was bored. He had joined the Verstock's extremist group for the chance to kill some tarmac filth and the humans that supported them and their allies. Unfortunately for him, the only people he had killed were a few undertrained embassy guards and an overweight receptionist. Hardly the sort of thing that he could brag about later to his friends at the bar. The great leader Vostok was pacing about the room in front of a set of large windows, getting more and more impatient. A pair of equally bored Hawkspur were guarding the door opposite, while the hostages, the Tar Mock ambassador, his staff and his family, were huddled in the corner, frightened. Varden studied the pathetic fool. The ambassador, like old Tarmock, was a somewhat short individual. He had grey skin and was almost white due to the stress he was under. 2 small beady eyes that made Varden want to retch, and a thin white mouth. Unlike the humans or the Hawkspur themselves, the Tarmock had no noses. Varden had heard that humans sometimes jokingly referred to their allies as Voldies. If there was a joke there, he didn't get it. His musings were interrupted by the bellow of Valsok.
Why haven't they responded?
Roared the tall, broad-shouldered terrorist leader.
Do they seek to make a mockery of me? I'll show them.
He stormed over to where the ambassador was protectively huddled over his 3 children, roughly hauling the alien to his feet. He shoved him away and wrenched one of the young tarmac away from its mother.
You don't think I'm a threat,
he muttered crazily, dragging the screaming child over to the hollow camera set in the middle of the door.
I'll show you a threat.
Meanwhile, the soldiers were storming the main staircase of the embassy. Their intel told them that the ambassador and the other hostages were being held in the main meeting room, on the top floor of the building. So far, they hadn't come across any more terrorists, but Lieutenant Boyd had no doubts that they would soon change. Almost prophetically, they emerged from the stairwell onto a landing, surprising a group of 4 terrorists. "Weapons free!" barked Boyd, raising his M16. One of the terrorists fired his laser repeater, and a pulse of energy flew across the room, searing into the soldier's armor. Ignoring the pain, Boyd fired his rifle in response, felling the reptilian alien. Private Harris raised his gun and killed 2 Hawkspur terrorists with headshots. "That one's for Jenkins," he seethed. Private Cooper and Sergeant Edwards finished off the last terrorists, and the team continued upwards. "They'll definitely know we're here now, sir," Commander Edwards said. "Shut up and keep 'em running," retorted Boyd. Vostok whirled around.
What was that noise?
He demanded, still clutching the Tarmock child. "I don't know," replied one of the door guards.
"Now go check it out,"
the leader yelled. "Yes, boss," replied the goon. Before he could open the door, everyone in the room heard a whine of laser rifles mixed with the staccato raps of human rock chuckers, as they were derisively called. Varden cautiously raised his laser repeater, while the 2 thugs at the door flipped over a table to use as cover. Ducking behind the table, they too raised their rifles in anticipation. The gunfire got louder and louder while the sound of laser fire slowly faded. Vostok pulled the Tarmock child to him, unholstering a pistol. He held the child's head. Suddenly, the gunfire stopped. One of the terrorists stood up and warily approached the door, only to have it blow up in his face. Something was thrown into the room. The thing bounced several times before exploding, blinding Varden. Shots rang out from the doorway, and there were cries of pain as Hawkspur were killed where they stood. Enraged by the human's lack of honor and the ringing sound in his ears, Varden fired blindly in the general direction of the gunshots. He got a cry of pain as his reward. Almost immediately, answering shots rang out. Something hit Varden in the chest. He gasped and cried out in pain as the bullets pierced through his armor and tore into his abdomen. After they had finished rupturing his internal organs, the lead projectiles exited his body, spraying the wall behind him with his blood. Staggering slightly, the Hawkspur slowly toppled over, feeling nothing as it collided with the carpeted floor. Private Harris watched as the alien's orange blood spread out in a pool underneath him, staining the once pristine carpet. His attention was drawn to the terrorist leader, who was standing by the window, clutching one of the ambassador's children in one hand and a laser pistol in the other. With a feeling of revulsion, the private noted that the large Hawkspur was holding said pistol to the child's head. Lieutenant Boyd had also noticed this. He slowly reached up to his combat helmet and pressed the switch on the side. The basic shape of the combat helmet used by human forces in the 23rd century looked like all combat helmets since the 1980s. This helmet had been modified over the centuries to completely cover the user's head. When combined with the Environmentally Sealed Combat Armor System, or ECAS, the helmet could protect the soldier wearing it in a myriad assortment of environments, including space. The faceplate of the helmet had a goggle-shaped visor. This visor had a variety of modes, including night vision and a targeting grid overlay. By pressing the switch, Boyd activated the targeting grid. Carefully moving his gun, he adjusted the bullet's projected trajectory.
You listen here, you scum,
The terrorist leader was saying.
You leave me alone. I'll kill this runt. I swear I'll do it.
No, Boyd replied, almost nonchalantly.
I want a transport here in 10 minutes, the crazed alien screamed. If I don't get my transport, I'll kill it.
We can't have that, deadpanned Boyd. He pressed the trigger and a single bullet flew out. As predicted by the helmet's computer, the bullet ricocheted off the window frame and hit the criminal in the side of the head. As he fell, he lost his grip on the child, who ran to the protective embrace of its mother.
Mr. Ambassador,
Boyd walked over to the tarmac, who was picking himself off the floor.
Are you hurt, sir?
No, we're all right.
The alien grinned weakly.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
No problem, sir,
replied Boyd. The other soldiers were fanning out in the room and checking the bodies of the would-be terrorists.
Harris,
he called out to the radio man.
Get command on the horn. Tell them the hostages are secure.
Yes, sir, replied Harris. The ambassador turned back to Boyd.
You know, I almost thought that your government would give in to its demands.
The ambassador confessed. Boyd looked at the ambassador.
Mr. Ambassador, don't you know,
he smiled behind his helmet,
we don't negotiate with terrorists.
End of story. I'd quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Bushmaster 177, Henry the Red, Caspar Arnholtz, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Elijah Silvercross, Dragzoon WRE, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.